Clara Whitlock stepped off the train in a blood-stained wedding dress, carrying nothing but a carpet bag and the truth that could destroy her. The man she'd been forced to marry was dead, finally, and she'd gambled everything on a 5-year-old promise from the only man she'd ever loved. But when Cole Braddock turned around on that wind-scraped platform, his eyes weren't filled with relief. They burned with something worse than hatred. A small boy clutched his hand, staring up at her with Cole's same dark gaze. "Papa?" the child whispered. "Who's that lady?" And Cole's jaw tightened like a man swallowing poison. Nobody. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, hit that like button and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Now settle in, because what comes next isn't pretty, and it sure as hell isn't simple. The Wyoming wind hit Clara like a fist the moment she stepped onto the platform. It tore at the torn lace of her dress, whipped her dark hair across her face, and carried with it the smell of coal smoke and livestock. She'd forgotten how brutal this place could be, how unforgiving. She hadn't forgotten Cole Braddock, though. Not for a single damn day in 5 years. He stood 20 feet away, near the water tower, one hand resting on the shoulder of a boy who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The child wore patched trousers and a shirt too big for his thin frame, and he was staring at Clara with the kind of wide-eyed curiosity that children reserve for strangers and stray dogs. Cole wasn't staring with curiosity. He was staring like a man who'd just seen a ghost climb out of its grave and ask for directions. Clara forced her legs to move. Each step across that platform felt like walking through deep water. Her carpet bag, containing everything she owned in the world, which wasn't much, bumped against her hip. The dress, once white, now showed rust-colored stains along the hem and sleeves. She hadn't had time to change, hadn't had time for anything except running. "Cole," she said when she was close enough that he couldn't pretend he hadn't heard her. His hand tightened on the boy's shoulder. Up close, she could see the changes 5 years had carved into him. New lines around his eyes. A scar cutting through his left eyebrow that hadn't been there before. His jaw was harder, his shoulders broader, and there was a coldness in his expression that made something twist painfully in her chest. "Clara." Her name came out flat. Not a question, not a greeting, just an acknowledgement that she existed, same as he might acknowledge a rattlesnake in his path. "I need to talk to you." "Bit late for that, isn't it?" The boy tugged on Cole's hand. "Papa, who is she?" "Papa." The word hit Clara like a slap. She'd known logically that 5 years was a long time, that Cole would have moved on, built a life, maybe found someone else. But knowing it and seeing this small, dark-haired child who had Cole's stubborn chin and serious eyes, were two entirely different things. "Nobody important," Cole said, and Clara felt that coldness spread from his voice into her bones. "Come on, Ethan, we've got supplies to load." He turned away. Just like that. Turned his back on her and started walking toward a wagon hitched near the general store, the boy's hand still clasped in his. Clara stood there for 3 seconds, maybe 4, feeling the weight of every mile she'd traveled to get here. The desperation, the fear, the wild hope that had carried her through 2 states and more close calls than she wanted to count. She'd spent the last of her money on that train ticket. Had nothing and nobody waiting for her anywhere else in the world. She'd come here because Cole was supposed to be her safe harbor, her last chance. "I didn't have a choice," she called after him. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she hated herself for it. 5 years ago, I didn't have a goddamn choice, Cole." He stopped. Didn't turn around, but his shoulders went rigid under his worn coat. "There's always a choice, Clara. You made yours." Then he kept walking, and this time she let him go. The town of Ridgeway hadn't grown much in 5 years. Same dusty main street, same row of false-fronted buildings that looked like they'd blow over in a strong wind. Same suspicious stares from people who treated outsiders like they carried plague. Clara walked slowly past the mercantile, the saloon, the tiny church with its crooked steeple, and felt every pair of eyes tracking her movement. A woman in a blue calico dress whispered something to her companion outside the dressmaker's shop. 2 men loading crates onto a freight wagon stopped their work to watch her pass. By the time she reached the boarding house at the end of the street, Clara knew the whole town would be buzzing about the stranger in the ruined wedding dress. Let them talk. She'd survived worse than gossip. The boarding house was run by a severe-looking woman named Mrs. Gaffney, who took one look at Clara's dress and carpet bag and quoted a price that was probably twice what she charged everyone else. Clara paid it without argument. She had exactly $7 left to her name, and Mrs. Gaffney's narrow room with its sagging bed and cracked wash basin was the only shelter she was going to find in this town. "Meals are at 6 and 6, Mrs. Gaffney said, handing over a key that looked older than the building. "No men in the rooms, no drinking, no loud noise after dark." "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Gaffney's eyes dropped to the stains on Clara's dress, then flicked back up with an expression that was equal parts disapproval and morbid curiosity. "You in some kind of trouble, Mrs. Clara corrected quietly. "Mrs. Whitlock, and no more than usual." That was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that came easy after years of practice. She climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, found her room, and locked the door behind her. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed and let herself shake. Her hands were trembling. Her whole body was trembling. She pressed her palms against her thighs and forced herself to breathe slowly, the way she'd learned to do when the fear got too big to swallow. The man she'd been forced to marry, the man whose blood was probably still under her fingernails, was dead. She'd made sure of that. But his brothers weren't, and neither was his father. And the Talbot family didn't forgive, and they sure as hell didn't forget. She'd run because staying meant dying, simple as that. And she'd run here to Ridgeway because 5 years ago Cole Braddock had looked at her like she hung the moon and promised her that no matter what happened, no matter how long it took, he'd wait for her. Turned out 5 years was too long. Turned out he had a son now. Turned out he looked at her like she was something rotten he'd found in his water barrel. Clara pulled off her ruined dress, wadded it up, and shoved it into the corner of the room. She washed her face and hands in the basin, scrubbing until her skin felt raw. And then she put on the only other dress she owned, a plain gray thing that had seen better days but at least didn't look like she'd crawled out of a grave wearing it. She had no plan, no money to speak of, no friends in this town, and apparently no allies either. But she'd learned a long time ago that you didn't need a plan to survive. You just needed to be stubborn enough to keep breathing. Clara lasted 2 days before she went looking for him. 2 days of sitting in that cramped boarding house room, eating Mrs. Gaffney's watery stew and hard bread, listening to the other boarders whisper about her in the hallway. 2 days of watching her money dwindle and knowing she'd need work soon, except nobody in Ridgeway was going to hire a woman with no references and a reputation that was already circling the drain. On the third morning, she walked to the mercantile and asked the clerk, a nervous young man with bad skin and fidgety hands, where Cole Braddock's ranch was located. The clerk stared at her like she'd asked directions to hell. "You a friend of his?" he asked finally. "Used to be." "Well, I don't know if he's looking for friends these days, ma'am. Cole keeps to himself mostly. Ever since—" He caught himself, glanced around like he was worried someone might overhear. "Ever since his wife passed, I mean. He's not real sociable." His wife. Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. How long ago did she die? 2 years, maybe? Little more? It was hard on him. Hard on the boy, too, though Ethan was just a baby when it happened. Some kind of fever, I heard. Came on fast. The clerk was still talking, but Clara had stopped listening. She bought a loaf of bread she couldn't afford and left before he could ask any more questions. Cole's ranch was 6 miles north of town, tucked up against the foothills where the land turned rocky and unforgiving. Clara walked because she didn't have money for a horse, and because walking gave her time to think, which was both a blessing and a curse. He'd been married, had a wife who died, had a son who looked at him with complete trust and called him Papa. 5 years ago, when Clara had disappeared from his life, Cole had been a ranch hand working someone else's land and dreaming about saving enough to buy his own place. Now he had that place, had built a life, had loved someone enough to marry her. And Clara had no right to feel betrayed by that, but she felt it anyway. The ranch appeared gradually as she crested a low rise, a sturdy cabin with a stone chimney, a barn that looked newer than the house, corrals and fencing that spoke of hard work and careful maintenance. Smoke rose from the chimney. A few chickens scratched in the dirt near the porch. Clara stopped at the edge of the property, suddenly uncertain. What the hell was she doing here? Cole had made it clear he didn't want to see her. Showing up at his home uninvited was just asking for more rejection, and she wasn't sure she could take another dose of the coldness she'd seen in his eyes at the train station. But where else did she have to go? She was halfway across the yard when the cabin door opened and Cole stepped out onto the porch. He had a rifle in his hands, not pointed at her, but not exactly casual either. "That's far enough," he called. Clara stopped, raised her hand slightly, showing she was unarmed. "I just want to talk." "Already told you we've got nothing to talk about." 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Cole's jaw worked like he was chewing on something bitter. For a long moment, he just stood there, and Clara thought he was going to tell her to get off his land and never come back. Then he leaned the rifle against the porch rail and crossed his arms over his chest. 5 minutes, he said. "Then you leave." Clara climbed the porch steps slowly, aware of every creak in the old wood. Up close, she could see the exhaustion carved into Cole's face. He looked like a man who didn't sleep much, and when he did, his dreams weren't kind. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," she said. No preamble, no easing into it, just the truth, plain and simple. "I left because my father sold me to pay off a gambling debt, married me off to a man named Raymond Talbot, and I didn't have any say in it." Cole's expression didn't change. "So you sent a letter. One letter, Clara. Said you were leaving and not to come looking for you. That sound like someone who didn't have a choice?" "I didn't send any letter." "Bullshit. I read it. Had your handwriting and everything." "Then someone forged it, because I never—" Clara stopped, closed her eyes, forced herself to stay calm. "I wrote you 20 letters, Cole, 20, begging you to come get me, telling you where I was. I never got a single reply, because I never got them. Or because you didn't want them." His eyes flashed. "Don't you dare put this on me. I waited for you, sat around like a damn fool waiting for you to come back. And when that letter came, when I read that you'd found someone better—" "Better?" Clara's voice cracked. "You think I found something better?" Raymond Talbot was a drunk and a bully who liked using his fists more than his words. I spent 4 years married to that bastard, and the only reason I'm standing here now is because he finally picked a fight with someone meaner than he was and lost. Cole went very still. "He's dead? As dead as he deserves to be. And his family? Looking for me, which is why I came here, because I've got nowhere else to go and nobody else to turn to, and I thought—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I thought you might still give a damn. Guess I was wrong about that too." She turned to leave, but Cole's hand shot out and caught her wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to stop her. "Wait." Clara didn't turn around. Couldn't. If she looked at him right now, she'd either start crying or start hitting him, and she wasn't sure which would be worse. "Show me," Cole said quietly. "Show me your wrist." Clara went cold. "What?" "You heard me. You spent 4 years with a man like that. You'll have the scars to prove it, so show me." For a moment she considered refusing, considered telling him to go to hell and walking away with whatever dignity she had left. But then she thought about the empty road behind her, the long miles back to town, the $7 in her pocket that wouldn't last the week. She turned around and held out her left arm. Cole pushed up her sleeve carefully, and Clara watched his face as he saw the marks. The thin white line circling her wrist where rope had cut into skin. The crooked set of her smallest finger, broken and healed wrong. The burn scar on her forearm, shaped like the end of a cigar. His thumb brushed over that scar, so gently she barely felt it, and when he looked up at her, his eyes were different. Not soft exactly, but something in them had shifted. "Clara, don't," she said, pulling her arm back. "Don't you dare apologize or look at me like I'm something broken. I survived. That's more than a lot of women can say. I should have come for you. I didn't tell you where I was because I didn't want you to. The Talbots would have killed you, Cole. Raymond's father owns half of Colorado, and his brothers are worse than he was. If you'd shown up trying to play hero, you'd be dead. Instead, I'm here with a dead wife and a son I'm raising alone, and you're—" He stopped, scrubbed a hand over his face. Christ, what a mess. From inside the cabin came a small voice. "Papa?" Cole's head snapped around. "Stay inside, Ethan." "But I heard shouting." "I said stay inside." The door closed with a soft click. Cole looked back at Clara, and for the first time since she'd arrived in Ridgeway, she saw something other than anger in his face. She saw exhaustion, confusion, maybe even a flicker of the man she used to know. "He doesn't know about you," Cole said quietly. "Doesn't know there was anyone before his mother. I'd like to keep it that way." Clara nodded. It hurt more than she wanted to admit, but she understood. I'm not here to mess up your life, Cole. I just needed somewhere to land for a few days while I figure out what's next. The Talbots. They really coming after you? Raymond's brothers are. His father too, probably. I don't know how close they are, but I know they won't stop looking. Cole was quiet for a long moment, staring past her toward the horizon like he could see something she couldn't. Then he sighed, and it was the sound of a man making a decision he knew he'd regret. You can stay in the barn, he said. There's a room above it. Used to be for a ranch hand, but it's empty now. It's not much, but it's dry and there's a stove. Clara blinked. You're serious? Don't make me change my mind. I can work. I'm not asking for charity. I can cook, clean, help with... I don't need help. Everyone needs help, Cole. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Clara saw the war happening behind his eyes. Saw him trying to reconcile the woman standing in front of him with the memory of who she used to be. 1 week, he said finally. You stay 1 week, keep your head down, don't cause any trouble. After that, we figure out what comes next. Deal? It wasn't what she'd hoped for. Wasn't even close. But it was more than she'd expected after the way he'd looked at her on that train platform. So Clara nodded. Deal. The room above the barn was exactly what Cole had described. Not much, but dry. It had a narrow bed, a potbelly stove, a table and chair that had seen better days, and a window that looked out over the ranch yard. Clara set her carpet bag on the floor and sat down on the bed, testing the mattress. It was lumpy, but serviceable. Below, she could hear the sounds of the ranch settling into evening. Cole's voice, low and patient, as he talked to his son. The soft clucking of chickens being shut into their coop, the creak of the barn door. She'd made it. Against all odds, through all the miles and close calls and moments when she'd been certain she wouldn't survive another day, she'd made it back to the one place that had ever felt like it might become home. But Cole had a son now. A life that didn't include her. A wife in the ground who'd given him something Clara never could. Stability, normalcy, a reason to build instead of run. Clara lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, at the rough-hewn beams and the cobwebs gathering in the corners. Her body ached in about 15 different places. Her wrist throbbed where Cole had touched the scars. Her heart felt like something heavy and bruised, sitting wrong in her chest. 1 week. She had 1 week to convince him she wasn't the enemy. 1 week to prove she could be useful without being a burden. 1 week to figure out where the hell she was supposed to go next. Outside, the sun was setting over the Wyoming hills, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust. Clara closed her eyes and listened to the wind rattling the barn walls. And she thought about all the versions of herself she'd buried over the last 5 years. The girl who'd believed in promises, the wife who'd learned to flinch, the widow who'd run with blood on her hands. She didn't know who she was now, didn't know if Cole would ever look at her without seeing betrayal, didn't know if she'd live long enough to find out. But she was here. And for tonight, that would have to be enough. The first 3 days passed in a kind of careful silence. Clara kept to the barn room, coming out only to fetch water from the pump or use the privy behind the chicken coop. She saw Cole from a distance, carrying feed to the livestock, mending fence line, chopping wood, with the kind of methodical precision that spoke of a man who worked to keep his mind quiet. He didn't look her way. She didn't expect him to. Ethan was harder to avoid. The boy had a curiosity that couldn't be contained by his father's warnings to stay away from the barn. On the second morning, Clara woke to find him sitting on an overturned bucket outside her door, carving a stick with a pocket knife that looked too big for his small hands. "You're not supposed to be here," Clara said, standing in the doorway. Ethan looked up at her with those serious dark eyes. "Papa said you're staying in the barn." "That's right. He said I'm not supposed to bother you." "Then why are you here?" The boy shrugged, went back to his carving. "I'm not bothering, I'm just sitting." Clara couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her mouth. "That's a pretty fine line you're walking." "What's a fine line?" "Never mind." She stepped down from the doorway, wrapping her shawl tighter against the morning chill. "What are you making?" "A horse, or maybe a dog. Haven't decided yet." Clara crouched down beside him, examined the piece of wood in his hands. It didn't look much like either animal, but she kept that observation to herself. "Your pa teach you to carve?" "Uh-huh." He says it's good for keeping your hands busy when your head's too full. Smart man. Ethan glanced up at her, tilted his head slightly. Are you the lady from the train? The one in the white dress? It wasn't white anymore by the time I got here, but yeah, that was me. Why was your dress all dirty? Clara hesitated. The truth that she'd crawled through mud and blood to escape the men hunting her wasn't something you told a 4-year-old. Long story, she said finally. Sometimes you have to travel rough to get where you're going. Where were you going? Here. Why? Because your pa and I used to be friends. A long time ago. Ethan considered this, his small face serious. Papa doesn't have many friends anymore. Mostly, he just has me. Something in Clara's chest tightened. Well, you're probably better company than most folks anyway. The boy grinned at that, quick and bright. And for just a second, Clara saw what Cole's smile used to look like before time and grief wore it down to nothing. Ethan! Cole's voice cut across the yard, sharp with warning. What did I tell you? Ethan scrambled to his feet, nearly dropping his carving. I was just talking, Papa. I wasn't bothering. Cole strode toward them, and Clara stood up slowly, keeping her hands visible. No sudden movements. Nothing that might look like a threat. Inside, Cole said to his son. Now. But now, Ethan. The boy's face fell, but he obeyed, trudging toward the cabin with his shoulders hunched. Cole watched him go, and Clara watched Cole, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. I didn't ask him to come over, she said quietly. He just showed up. He's a kid. Kids don't know better. He's lonely, Cole. Anyone can see that. Cole's eyes snapped to hers, and there was heat in them now. Anger, maybe, or something close to it. You've been here 3 days, and you think you know what my son needs? I know what loneliness looks like. I've worn it long enough. Stay away from him. He came to me. I don't care. Stay away from him, Clara. I mean it. He turned and walked back toward the cabin, and Clara stood there in the cold morning air, feeling like she'd been slapped. She understood it. Understood that Cole was protecting his son from a woman who'd brought nothing but trouble and uncertainty into their lives. But understanding didn't make it hurt any less. That afternoon, she walked into town. She needed work, needed money, needed something to do besides sit in that barn room and count the hours until Cole threw her out for good. Ridgeway wasn't big on opportunities for women, especially strange women with no references and questionable pasts. But Clara had learned to take what she could get. The dressmaker's shop was a bust. So was the boarding house, the mercantile, and the hotel that looked like it hadn't seen a paying guest in months. By the time Clara reached the saloon at the far end of town, she was running out of options and patience. The bartender was a thick-necked man with a scar running from his ear to his collar. He looked Clara up and down with the kind of assessment that made her skin crawl, then shook his head. Don't need anyone. I can clean, serve drinks, keep the books. I'm a hard worker. I'm sure you are, sweetheart, but the answer's still no. Clara leaned against the bar, dropped her voice. You know what I think? I think you've heard the gossip about me, and you're worried I'll scare off your customers. The bartender's expression didn't change. Lady, I don't know you from Eve, but this is a small town, and people talk. You showed up wearing a bloody wedding dress and shacked up at Cole Braddock's place inside of a week. That kind of scandal's bad for business. I'm not shacked up anywhere. I'm sleeping in his barn. Same difference to folks around here. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to point out the unfairness of being judged for crimes she hadn't committed, but she knew it wouldn't matter. Small towns had their own logic, their own rules, and outsiders didn't get to rewrite them. She left the saloon and walked back toward the boarding house, her boots kicking up dust with each step. The sky was turning gray, heavy clouds rolling in from the north. Rain, probably, or maybe snow if the temperature dropped. Either way, she needed to get back to the ranch before the weather turned. She was halfway down the main street when she heard her name. Clara Whitlock? Clara stopped, turned slowly. The woman standing behind her was about 50, dressed in an expensive riding outfit that looked out of place in this rough-edged town. Her face was sharp, all angles and judgment, and her eyes were the cold blue of lake ice. Do I know you? Clara asked. No, but I know you. The woman stepped closer, and Clara caught the scent of expensive perfume. Or rather, I know of you. Word travels fast when a Talbot widow shows up in a place like this. Clara's blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? The woman smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Raymond Talbot's wife, late Raymond Talbot, I should say, died under very mysterious circumstances, and his widow disappeared the same night. The family's been looking for you. Then they can keep looking. They're offering a reward. $500 for information leading to your whereabouts. $500. That was enough money to tempt anyone in this town, let alone a stranger who clearly had more wealth than sense. Clara felt the trap closing around her, felt the walls of her temporary safety starting to crumble. Who are you? Clara asked. Someone who believes in justice. Someone who thinks a woman who kills her husband ought to answer for it. I didn't kill anyone. That's for a court to decide, isn't it? The woman turned and walked away, her skirt swishing against the boardwalk. Clara stood frozen for a long moment, her heart hammering against her ribs. Then she started walking, fast at first, then faster, until she was almost running. She had to get back to the ranch, had to warn Cole, had to figure out how much time she had before the Talbots showed up on his doorstep looking for blood. The sky opened up when she was still 2 miles from Cole's land. Rain came down in sheets, cold and punishing, soaking through her dress and turning the road into a river of mud. Clara kept moving, her teeth chattering, her hands numb. Lightning split the sky, followed by thunder that sounded like the world breaking apart. By the time she reached the ranch, she could barely feel her legs. The cabin was dark, except for a single light in the window. Clara stumbled toward the barn, thinking she'd change into dry clothes and wait out the storm, but the barn door swung open before she reached it. Cole stood silhouetted in the doorway, a lantern in his hand. What the hell are you doing out in this? Had to. Get back! Clara's teeth were chattering so hard she could barely get the words out. Cole grabbed her arm and pulled her inside out of the rain. You could have stayed in town, could have waited it out. No time. Someone knows. Someone knows who I am. Cole went still. What are you talking about? Clara told him about the woman, about the reward, about the Talbots, and the $500 that would bring every bounty hunter and opportunist within 100 miles down on this ranch. Cole listened without interrupting, his face unreadable in the lantern light. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're shaking. Come on. I'll be fine, just need to change clothes. Clara, you're about 2 minutes from hypothermia. Get in the cabin. You said stay away from Ethan. I said a lot of things. Right now I'm saying get inside before you freeze to death in my goddamn barn. He didn't wait for her to argue. Just grabbed her arm again and hauled her across the muddy yard, up the porch steps, and through the cabin door. The warmth inside hit Clara like a wall. She stood dripping on the floor, her whole body trembling, while Cole disappeared into another room. Ethan was sitting at the table, a bowl of stew in front of him. He stared at Clara with wide eyes. You're all wet. Good observation, Clara managed through her chattering teeth. Cole returned with a blanket and draped it over her shoulders. Sit by the fire. Don't argue. Clara sat. The heat from the fireplace felt like knives against her frozen skin, painful and necessary. Cole knelt beside her, pulled off her soaked boots, and Clara was too cold and too tired to protest. Papa? Ethan said from the table. Is she going to be okay? She'll be fine. Finish your supper. But, Ethan. The boy went back to his stew, but Clara could feel him watching her. Cole stood, grabbed a tin cup from the shelf, and poured something dark into it from a bottle near the stove. Whiskey, Clara realized when he pressed the cup into her hands. Drink. She drank. The whiskey burned going down, but it chased away some of the cold. Clara wrapped her hands around the cup, holding on to the warmth. Cole dragged a chair over and sat across from her. This woman. You get a name? No? But she wasn't from around here. Clothes were too fancy, talked like someone used to getting what she wants. Probably staying at the hotel then. Not many places for fancy folks to land in Ridgeway. Cole rubbed a hand over his face, and Clara saw the exhaustion there again, deeper than before. $500. That's serious money. Someone in town's going to talk. I know. How long before they get here? I don't know. Could be days, could be hours. Cole looked at her for a long moment, and Clara couldn't read his expression. Then he stood, walked to the window, stared out at the rain-soaked darkness. You should have told me how bad it was, he said quietly. Should have told me at the train station. Would it have made a difference? Maybe. I don't know. He turned back to face her. The Talbots. What are they going to do if they find you? Clara met his eyes. Kill me. Probably make it slow. Raymond's father doesn't forgive, and his brothers are worse than he ever was. And you think they won't care that you're here? That coming after you might put me and Ethan in danger? I think they'll do whatever it takes to get what they want. They're not reasonable people, Cole. Then you can't stay. The words hit Clara harder than she expected. She'd known this was coming, known that 1 week was already more than she deserved, but hearing it spoken out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I know, she said softly. I'll leave in the morning. I didn't mean… Cole stopped, shook his head. Christ. I don't know what I meant. Ethan pushed his bowl away. Papa, I'm tired. Then go to bed, son. Will the lady still be here tomorrow? Cole looked at Clara, then at his son. I don't know. Now go on. Brush your teeth first. Ethan slid off his chair and disappeared into the back room. Cole waited until he heard the door close, then turned back to Clara. If you leave, where will you go? I don't know. West, maybe. California. Somewhere the Talbots can't reach. That's not a plan. That's just running. Running's kept me alive this long. And how long do you think that'll last? They've got money, Clara. Money buys information, buys men, buys whatever they need to track you down. You can run all the way to the ocean, and it won't matter. What else am I supposed to do? Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You could stay. You could fight. Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fight them with what? I've got no money, no gun, no… You've got me. The words hung in the air between them. Clara stared at him, trying to understand what he was offering, what it might cost them both. Why? She asked finally. Why would you help me after everything? Because I should have helped you 5 years ago. Because I let you down once and I'm not doing it again. Cole's jaw tightened. And because if those bastards show up here looking for you, I want to be ready. Cole, this isn't your fight. You made it my fight when you came here. I didn't mean to drag you into this. Well, you did, and now we deal with it. He moved back to his chair, sat down heavily. Tomorrow I'll ride into town, ask around about that woman. See what I can find out. You stay here, stay out of sight. If anyone comes to the ranch, you hide. Understand? Clara nodded. Her hands had stopped shaking, but the fear was still there, coiled tight in her chest. What about Ethan? What about him? He's going to have questions. Kids always do. Let me worry about Ethan. Cole, I said let me worry about it. The edge in his voice told Clara the conversation was over. She finished the whiskey, set the cup aside, and pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Outside, the storm was still raging, rain hammering against the roof and windows. Inside, the fire crackled and popped, throwing shadows across the rough plank walls. Thank you, Clara said quietly. For this. For all of it. Cole didn't answer, just stood and walked to the door of Ethan's room, paused with his hand on the frame. You can sleep out here tonight. Couch isn't much, but it's dry. I'll get you some blankets. He disappeared into the back, and Clara heard him talking softly to his son, heard Ethan's sleepy reply. When Cole came back, he had an armful of quilts that smelled like cedar and wood smoke. These should keep you warm enough. Cole, don't. Just don't. He set the blankets on the couch, wouldn't meet her eyes. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He retreated to his room and closed the door, leaving Clara alone with the fire and the storm and the weight of everything unsaid between them. She made up the couch as best she could, kicked off her wet stockings, and lay down fully dressed under the pile of quilts. The fire was dying down to embers, and the cabin was growing cold, but Clara felt warmer than she had in days. Cole was helping her. After everything, after the years apart, after the anger and betrayal and all the walls he'd built between them, he was still helping her. Clara closed her eyes and listened to the rain, and for the first time since Raymond Talbot had hit the ground and stopped breathing, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she might survive this after all. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Ethan's voice asking questions. Clara kept her eyes closed, listening. Why's she sleeping on our couch? Because the barn's too cold. Is she going to stay here now? I don't know, son. Maybe for a little while. I like her. She didn't tell me to go away when I was carving. That doesn't mean she wants you bothering her all the time. I wasn't bothering. I was just being friendly. Cole sighed, and Clara heard the scrape of a chair. Eat your breakfast. We've got work to do today. Clara opened her eyes. Morning light was filtering through the windows, weak and gray. Cole was standing at the stove, his back to her, and Ethan was at the table with a plate of eggs and bread. The boy saw her first. "You're awake!" Cole turned, coffee pot in hand. "Morning?" "Morning." Clara sat up, ran a hand through her tangled hair. She probably looked like hell, slept in dress, no shoes, hair going every direction, but she was past caring about appearances. "There's coffee if you want it," Cole said, "and eggs." "I don't want to take your food." "Clara, just eat the damn eggs." Ethan giggled at that, and Clara saw the corner of Cole's mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but close. Clara moved to the table, accepted the plate Cole handed her, and ate, because refusing would have been more trouble than it was worth. The eggs were overcooked and the bread was stale, but it was the first real meal she'd had in days that wasn't boarding house slop. "Papa's going to town today," Ethan announced. "He said I have to stay here with you." Clara glanced at Cole. "Is that safe?" "Safer than him coming with me. If that woman's still around, I don't want Ethan anywhere near her." Cole poured himself coffee, leaned against the counter. "You know how to shoot?" "I can point and pull a trigger. That count?" "It'll have to." He nodded toward the rifle hanging over the door. "That's loaded. Safety's on. You know which end the bullets come out of?" "I'm not an idiot, Cole." "Didn't say you were. Just making sure." He took a long drink of coffee, then set the cup down. "I'll be back before dark. Anyone shows up that you don't recognize, you take Ethan to the root cellar behind the house, and you stay there until I get back. Understand?" "What if they don't leave?" "Then you use the rifle." Clara swallowed hard. "And if it's the Talbots?" Cole's expression went hard. "Then you shoot first and sort it out later." He finished his coffee, grabbed his coat from the peg by the door, and paused to ruffle Ethan's hair. "Be good for Clara. Don't give her any trouble." "I won't, Papa." "And stay inside, I mean it." "Okay." Cole looked at Clara one more time, and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or just the shared weight of knowing how bad things could get. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a solid thunk. Ethan watched through the window until his father disappeared down the road. Then he turned to Clara with a grin that was equal parts mischief and hope. "So, what do we do now?" Clara looked at the boy, at the cabin that needed cleaning, at the pile of mending in the corner, and the dishes stacked by the wash basin. She thought about Cole's warning to stay away from his son, thought about all the reasons keeping her distance was the smart thing to do. Then she said, "You ever scrub a floor before?" Ethan made a face. "That's boring." "Most necessary things are. Come on, I'll teach you how to do it right." They spent the morning cleaning. Clara washed dishes while Ethan dried them, talking non-stop about his father's horses, the chickens he'd named even though Cole said you shouldn't name animals you might have to eat, the coyote he'd seen last week that was missing half an ear. The boy was lonely. That much was obvious, and he talked like someone who'd been storing up words for months with nobody to say them to. Clara listened and worked and tried not to think about how easy it would be to get attached to this child, this cabin, this life that could never be hers. By noon, they'd cleaned the main room, swept the porch, and fed the chickens. Ethan showed Clara where the eggs were hidden, proud as if he'd laid them himself. Clara made sandwiches from the leftover bread and some dried meat she found in the larder, and they ate sitting on the porch steps, watching clouds build in the distance. "Papa says a storm's coming," Ethan said through a mouthful of bread. "A big one." "Your papa know a lot about weather?" "He knows about everything." Clara smiled. That's what all kids think about their fathers. "But it's true. He can fix anything, build anything. He built this whole cabin himself after Mama died." Clara's smile faded. "You remember your mama?" Ethan shook his head. "I was too little. Papa says she was real pretty and real kind, but she got sick and the doctor couldn't help her. He says she loved me a lot, though." "I'm sure she did." "Do you have kids?" The question hit Clara like a fist. "No." "Did you want them?" "Once, a long time ago. How come you didn't have any?" Clara looked at the boy, at his open, curious face, and knew she couldn't tell him the truth, that Raymond Talbot had made sure she'd never carry a child, that some injuries ran too deep to heal. So she said, "Sometimes things don't work out the way you plan." Papa says that too. He says life's messy and you just gotta do your best. Your papa's a smart man. I know. Ethan finished his sandwich, brushed crumbs off his lap. Can I show you something? Sure. The boy led her to the barn, to a stall in the back where a mare was nursing a foal that couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. The foal was all legs and big eyes, wobbly and perfect. Papa says I can name her, Ethan said proudly. He says she's going to be my horse when she's big enough. What are you going to call her? Haven't decided yet. What do you think? Clara studied the foal, the way she pressed close to her mother, the white star on her forehead. Hope, she said quietly. I'd call her Hope. Ethan wrinkled his nose. That's a weird name for a horse. Maybe, but it's a good word. Means believing things can get better even when they're bad. Oh. The boy thought about that. I like it. Hope. He reached through the stall bars, trying to touch the foal's nose. Do you think things will get better? I don't know, kid. I hope so. They stayed in the barn until the sky started to darken, watching the mare and foal, talking about nothing important. It was the most peace Clara had felt in longer than she could remember. Just her and this boy who didn't know enough to judge her, in a barn that smelled like hay and horses and the promise of rain. When they went back inside, Clara got the fire going and started pulling together something for supper. She found potatoes in the larder, an onion that had seen better days, some salt pork that would do. It wasn't much, but she'd made meals from less. Ethan sat at the table watching her work. You're pretty good at cooking. Had a lot of practice. Were you a cook before you came here? Something like that. What's something like that mean? Clara chopped the onion, her eyes watering. Means I did what I had to do to survive. The boy was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Papa does that too. He doesn't like ranching much, but he says it keeps us fed and that's what matters. What would he rather be doing? Building things. He's real good with wood, made all the furniture in here, and the porch, and he's building me a sled for when it snows. Clara looked around the cabin with new eyes, seeing Cole's work in every beam and board. She remembered him talking about wanting to build things, back when they were young and stupid and thought the future was something they could shape with their bare hands. Turned out the future had other plans. She was putting the stew together when she heard hoofbeats outside. Clara froze, her hand going to the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables. One rider, moving fast. Ethan, she said quietly, go to your room. But now, and don't come out until I say. The boy must have heard something in her voice, because he obeyed without arguing. Clara grabbed the rifle from over the door, checked that the safety was off, and moved to the window. Cole rode into the yard at a gallop, his horse lathered and breathing hard. He swung down from the saddle and hit the ground running, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. Clara had the door open before he reached it. They're coming, Cole said, his face grim. The Talbots. They're 2 days out, maybe less. Someone in town sent them a telegram. Clara felt her stomach drop. Who? Don't know. Don't matter. What matters is we've got maybe 48 hours before they're on top of us. Then I'll leave. I'll leave right now. They won't have any reason to... No. Cole grabbed her shoulders, and Clara saw something fierce in his eyes. You're not running. Not this time. We stand our ground. Cole, you don't understand what these men are capable of. I understand just fine. I also understand that I'm not letting you walk out that door to get hunted down like an animal. His grip tightened. You hear me? We face this together or we don't face it at all. Clara stared at him, at this man who'd built a life from nothing, who'd buried a wife and raised a son alone, who had every reason to throw her to the wolves and none to stand beside her. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Cole's jaw worked. For a long moment he didn't answer. Then he said, because 5 years ago I loved you, and maybe I'm a fool, but some part of me never stopped. The words hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Clara felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd kept locked down for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Before she could think better of it, before fear or common sense could stop her, she reached up and pulled Cole down into a kiss. He went rigid for half a second, and Clara thought he was going to push her away. Then his arms came around her and he was kissing her back, hard and desperate, like a drowning man finding air. Clara tasted coffee and dust and 5 years of longing, felt his hands in her hair, felt the solid weight of him anchoring her to this moment. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Cole pressed his forehead against hers. "We're going to get through this," he said roughly. "Whatever it takes. I'm not losing you again." Clara closed her eyes, held on to him, and let herself believe it. From the bedroom came Ethan's small voice. "Papa, is everything okay?" Cole pulled back, ran a hand over his face. "Yeah, son, everything's fine. You can come out now." The boy emerged, looking between them with confusion and something that might have been hope. "Are the bad men coming?" Cole crouched down to his level. "Maybe, but we're going to be ready for them. And nobody's going to hurt you or Clara. I promise." "What are we going to do?" Cole looked up at Clara, then back at his son. "We're going to fight." The fight Cole promised didn't look like much at first. It looked like boarding up windows and checking ammunition and moving Ethan's bed away from the exterior wall. It looked like Clara standing in the middle of the cabin with a rifle in her hands, learning how to aim at shadows while her heart hammered against her ribs. "Don't think," Cole said from behind her. "Just point and squeeze. Thinking gets you killed." Clara adjusted her grip, tried to steady her breathing. The rifle felt wrong in her hands, too heavy, too foreign. She'd never shot anything bigger than a rabbit, and that had been years ago when her father was still alive and the world still made some kind of sense. "What if I miss?" she asked. "Then you shoot again. You keep shooting until they stop coming." "And if there's too many of them?" Cole moved to stand beside her, his own rifle held with the easy confidence of a man who'd grown up with weapons. "Then we make them pay for every inch of ground. Make them think twice about whether you're worth the trouble." "I'm not worth dying for, Cole." He looked at her, and his eyes were hard. "That's not your call to make." Ethan was watching from the corner, his knees pulled up to his chest. He hadn't said much since Cole explained what was coming, just went very quiet and small. Clara wanted to go to him, wanted to tell him everything would be fine, but she'd learned a long time ago that lying to children didn't protect them. It just made the truth hurt worse when it landed. Cole had sent word to town, asking the sheriff to ride out. The sheriff had sent back a note saying he'd look into it when he had time, which was lawman speak for not at all. Clara wasn't surprised. Small-town sheriffs didn't get involved in matters concerning rich families from other territories, not unless they wanted to find themselves looking for new work. They were on their own. That night, Cole made Ethan sleep in the root cellar. The boy cried, said he was scared of the dark, said he wanted to stay with his papa. Cole held him for a long time, his big hands gentle on his son's small shoulders, and Clara saw the fear in his face that he was trying so hard to hide. "It's just for a few nights," Cole said quietly. "Just until we know it's safe. You've got blankets down there and a lantern, and I'll check on you every hour. I promise. What if something happens to you?" "Nothing's going to happen to me." "But what if it does?" Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Then Clara will take care of you. She'll get you somewhere safe." Ethan looked at Clara with those big dark eyes, and she felt something twist in her chest. "I don't want you to go away." "I'm not going anywhere, kid." "Promise?" Clara glanced at Cole, saw him nod slightly. "I promise." It was a lie. They both knew it was a lie. If the Talbots came and things went sideways, Clara's job was to grab Ethan and run as far and as fast as she could. But the boy needed to hear the promise, needed something to hold on to, so she gave it to him. Cole carried Ethan down to the cellar, got him settled with a pile of quilts and the old hound dog that usually slept in the barn. Clara stood at the top of the stairs, listening to Cole's low voice telling some story about a rabbit and a fox, and she thought about all the ways this could go wrong. When Cole came back up, he barred the cellar door from the outside and checked it twice. Then he looked at Clara. "You should get some sleep. I'll take first watch." "I'm not going to sleep." "Clara, don't. I'm not a child, Cole. I know what's coming." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, then help me with the rest of the windows." They worked in silence, nailing boards across the glass, leaving only narrow gaps to shoot through. Clara's hands were shaking by the time they finished, and she couldn't tell if it was from fear or exhaustion or the strange electric energy that came from knowing violence was headed your way and there wasn't a damn thing you could do to stop it. Around midnight, Cole made coffee. They sat at the table, drinking it black and bitter, while the wind picked up outside and rattled the shutters. "Tell me about him," Cole said finally. "About Raymond." Clara wrapped her hands around her cup. "Why?" "Because I need to know what we're dealing with. His brothers, they gonna fight like him? Raymond was a coward. He only hit people who couldn't hit back. His brothers are different, meaner, smarter." Clara took a sip of coffee, felt it burn all the way down. "Thomas is the oldest. He's the one who runs the family business now that their father's half blind. He's cold, methodical. Doesn't get angry, just gets even. Michael's the middle one. He's got a temper and likes using his fists, but he's not stupid. He knows when to pull back." "And the old man?" "Samuel Talbot. He built an empire out of cattle and silver and other people's misery. He's got half of Colorado in his pocket. Sheriffs, judges, politicians. Anyone who crosses him ends up broke or dead or wishing they were." Cole was quiet, processing this. Then he said, "How'd Raymond die?" Clara looked at him. "You really want to know?" "Yeah. He was drunk. He came at me with a bottle and I grabbed a knife from the kitchen. We fought. He was stronger, but I was desperate." Clara's voice was flat now, stripped of emotion. "I got the knife into his throat, watched him bleed out on the kitchen floor. Then I took what money I could find and ran." "You kill him in self-defense. Doesn't matter, not to his family. All they see is one of theirs dead and someone needing to pay for it." Cole reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm against her cold fingers. "We're not giving you to them, Clara. I don't care what kind of money or power they've got. They're not taking you. You might not have a choice. There's always a choice." Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that courage and determination could stand against wealth and influence and the kind of men who bought justice instead of earning it. But she'd seen too much, survived too much, to put her faith in fairy tales. "Cole," she said quietly, "if it comes down to me or Ethan, it won't. But if it does, I said it won't." His grip on her hand tightened. "We're all getting through this, all of us. You hear me?" Clara nodded, even though she didn't believe it. They took turns keeping watch through the night. Cole sat by the window with his rifle across his knees while Clara tried to rest on the couch, and then they switched. Every hour, Cole went down to the cellar to check on Ethan, came back up looking a little more worn each time. Dawn came slow and gray, the kind of morning that felt like it couldn't decide whether to rain or snow or just stay miserable. Clara stood at the window watching the empty road and tried not to think about what might be coming down it. Cole made breakfast, eggs and bread and the last of the coffee. He took a plate down to Ethan, stayed longer this time. When he came back, his face was tight. "He's scared." "He should be," Clara said. "We all should be. He asked me if we're going to die. What did you tell him?" "That I don't know. That I'm doing everything I can to make sure we don't." Cole sat down heavily at the table. "I've never lied to him before. Didn't seem right to start now." Clara thought about all the lies she'd told over the years. Lies to survive, lies to protect, lies because the truth was too ugly to speak out loud. She thought about the promise she'd made to Ethan in the cellar and wondered if keeping it would mean breaking all the others. The first day passed without incident. So did the second. By the third day, Claire's nerves were stretched so thin she jumped at every sound. The waiting was worse than anything, worse than running, worse than fighting. At least when you were in motion, you had something to do besides imagine all the ways you could die. Cole kept busy checking the defenses, cleaning weapons, making plans for things that might never happen. Clara watched him move through the cabin, saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand kept drifting to the pistol at his hip. "Maybe they're not coming," she said on the afternoon of the third day. "Maybe whoever sent that telegram was full of shit." "They're coming." Cole didn't look up from the ammunition he was counting. "Question is when, not if." "How can you be so sure?" "Because $500 is serious money, and the Talbots have a reputation to protect. They don't let things like murder go unanswered." "I didn't murder him. I defended myself." "Like I said, doesn't matter to them." Clara paced to the window, looked out at the lengthening shadows. "I can't stay in this cabin forever, Cole. Eventually, I'm going to have to—" She stopped. There was dust on the horizon. A lot of it. "Cole." Something in her voice made him look up. He was at the window in 3 strides, rifle already in his hands. They watched together as the dust cloud grew closer, resolved into shapes. 4 riders, moving at a steady pace. Not hurrying, not hanging back, just coming. Get Ethan, Cole said quietly. Get him to the cellar and stay there. I'm not hiding while you... Clara, I need you to protect my son. Can you do that? She looked at his face, saw what it was costing him to ask. Saw the fear underneath the determination, the love that made him willing to stand between his child and the world's ugliness. Yeah, she said. I can do that. Cole pulled her close, kissed her hard and fast. No matter what happens, you get him out. You take the horses and you ride north until you hit the railroad. You don't stop, you don't look back. Understand? Cole, say you understand. I understand. He let her go and Clara ran to the cellar, threw open the door, and climbed down the ladder. Ethan was sitting exactly where they'd left him, the dog's head in his lap. Is it them? He asked. Yeah, kid, it's them. Where's Papa? He's upstairs. He's going to talk to them, see if he can sort this out without anyone getting hurt. Ethan's face crumpled. I'm scared. Clara knelt beside him, took his small face in her hands. I know, but your Papa is the smartest, strongest man I've ever met, and he's not going to let anything bad happen to us. You believe me? The boy nodded, but his eyes were wet. Good. Now I need you to stay down here and be very, very quiet. No matter what you hear, you don't make a sound. Can you do that for me? What if something happens to you and Papa? It won't. But what if it does? Clara heard footsteps on the porch above them. Voices. Cole's voice, calm and steady, and another voice she didn't recognize, smooth, educated, cold as river ice. Then you take Daisy, Clara whispered, nodding to the dog. And you run. You run as fast as you can to town and you find someone to help. But that's not going to happen because we're all going to be fine. The voices above grew louder. Clara heard Cole say something about property rights and the law. Heard the cold voice laugh. Stay here, she told Ethan. Don't move. She climbed the ladder and pressed her ear to the cellar door. Through the wood, she could hear Cole talking to someone on the porch. She couldn't make out all the words, but she caught enough. Don't know what you're talking about. Waste of time, Braddock. We know she's here. My land, and I'll thank you to get off it. Make this easy or we can make it hard. Your choice. Clara's hand went to the pistol tucked in her belt. Cole had given it to her that morning, shown her how to check the chambers, how to cock the hammer. She'd never shot a person before. Never thought she'd have to. Turned out there were a lot of things you never thought you'd do until you didn't have another option. She eased the cellar door open an inch, peered through the gap. From this angle, she could see Cole's back, the rifle held loosely in his hands. Beyond him, on the porch, stood 4 men. The one doing the talking was tall and thin, dressed in expensive clothes that looked ridiculous out here in the middle of nowhere. His face was angular, sharp-featured, and his eyes had the flat emptiness of someone who'd hurt people and felt nothing about it. Thomas Talbot. Had to be. He had Raymond's nose, Raymond's cold smile. Behind Thomas stood 3 other men. 2 of them were clearly his muscle. Big, rough-looking types with guns on their hips and violence in their eyes. The third was older, heavier, with a gray beard and features that matched Thomas's closely enough that Clara knew it had to be the old man himself. Samuel Talbot had come for her personally. That was bad. That meant this wasn't just about revenge. It was about sending a message. We can do this civilized, Thomas was saying. You hand over the woman, we take her back to Colorado to face justice, and you go back to your quiet life. Nobody gets hurt. And if I don't, Thomas smiled, then we burn your ranch to the ground with you in it, take the woman anyway, and make sure everyone knows what happens to people who harbor murderers. That what you want? Clara saw Cole's shoulders tense. She's not a murderer. She defended herself against a man who beat her for 4 years. That's for a court to decide. The same courts your family owns? Yeah, I'm sure that'll be real fair. You're trying my patience, Braddock. And you're trespassing on my land. One of the muscle men shifted, and Clara saw the barrel of a shotgun. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might crack a rib. 4 against 1. Cole was good, but he wasn't that good. If this turned into a fight, he'd die before he got 2 shots off. She couldn't let that happen. Clara pushed the cellar door open wider, started to climb out, but froze when she heard a new voice from the porch. Papa? Ethan. The boy had disobeyed her, had climbed up from the cellar and come inside. Clara could see him standing in the doorway of the cabin, his face white with fear. Cole's whole body went rigid. "Ethan, get back inside." "But Papa." "Now, son." Thomas Talbot's eyes flicked to the boy, and something ugly crossed his face. "That's your kid, Braddock?" Cole moved, putting himself between Thomas and the door. "This has nothing to do with him." "Everything to do with him, actually. See, a man with a child, he's got something to lose, makes him reasonable." Thomas took a step forward. "So let me make this real simple. You give us the woman, or we take the boy instead. Let you think about what happens when you cross the Talbot family." The world went very still. Clara could hear her own breathing, could hear the wind in the trees, could hear her heart beating against her ribs like it was trying to escape. Cole raised his rifle. "You touch my son, I'll kill you where you stand." "You can try." Thomas nodded to his men. "Take the kid." Everything happened at once. The two muscle men moved toward the door. Cole swung his rifle around. Samuel Talbot shouted something, and Clara came up out of that cellar like a demon, pistol in her hand, and fired. The bullet hit one of the muscle men in the shoulder, spun him around. He went down hard, cursing, and suddenly everyone was shouting and reaching for weapons. "Stop!" Clara yelled. "Stop, or the next one goes through someone's head." Thomas turned to look at her, and for a second there was something like surprise on his face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. "Clara Whitlock," he said. "Been looking for you. Found me. Now get off this land before I put a bullet in you. You won't shoot me. You're not that stupid. Try me." Thomas studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "You know what I think? I think you're scared. I think you're tired of running. I think part of you wants this to be over. You don't know anything about what I want. I know you killed my brother. Your brother was a piece of shit who got what he deserved." The smile vanished from Thomas's face. "You got a mouth on you, girl. Going to enjoy watching them hang you. Gonna have to catch me first." The wounded man was back on his feet now, his left arm hanging useless. The four Talbots stood on the porch, and Cole stood between them and the cabin, and Clara stood with a gun that had 5 bullets left in the chamber and no plan beyond making sure Ethan didn't get hurt. Samuel Talbot finally spoke, his voice a rumble of gravel and tobacco. "Let's all calm down here. Nobody else needs to get shot." "Then leave," Clara said. "Can't do that. You killed my son. That requires an answer. Your son beat me, raped me, and tried to kill me. If there's any justice in this world, he's burning in hell right now." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "You think you can stand there and slander a dead man? You think that'll save you?" "I think the truth is the truth, whether you want to hear it or not." Cole hadn't moved, his rifle still trained on Thomas. "You got what you came for. You found her. Now you know where she is, and you know she's not coming quietly. So you can either leave now and nobody else gets hurt, or you can try to take her and find out how many of you die in the process." Thomas laughed. "You really think you can take all 4 of us?" "Don't have to take all 4, just have to take you. Kill the head and the body dies." The words hung in the air. Clara saw Thomas's hand drift toward his pistol, saw the muscle men shift their weight, saw old Samuel Talbot's face go hard. "You threatening my son, Braddock?" "I'm making a promise. You try to take my boy or hurt this woman, and Thomas dies first. You can bank on that." For a long, terrible moment, nobody moved. Clara could see the calculation happening behind Thomas's eyes, could see him weighing the cost of pushing this further. 4 against 2, but the 2 were desperate and dug in, and the 4 had to know that desperation made people dangerous. Finally, Thomas raised his hand. "Fall back." The muscle men looked confused. "But, boss," "I said, fall back. We're leaving." Samuel turned to his son. "Thomas, we can't just—" "We're leaving." Thomas's eyes never left Cole's face. "But this isn't over, not by a long shot. We'll be back, Braddock. With the law, with enough men to make sure this goes our way. And when we come back, you're going to wish you'd been smart enough to hand her over when you had the chance." "I'll take my chances." Thomas backed down the porch steps, his men following. They mounted up slowly, deliberately, making it clear they weren't running, just regrouping. The wounded man needed help getting into his saddle, and Clara felt a sick twist of satisfaction watching him struggle. Samuel Talbot was the last to mount. He looked at Clara with eyes that promised suffering, promised retribution, promised that this was far from finished. "You're a dead woman," he said quietly. "You just don't know it yet." Then they rode off, and Clara watched them go with her pistol still raised and her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold it. The moment they were out of sight, Cole spun around. "Ethan, you all right?" The boy was crying, silent tears running down his face. Cole swept him up, held him tight, and Clara saw his own hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Papa. I'm sorry. I got scared and I—" "It's okay. You're okay. We're all okay." But they weren't okay. Not even close. Clara could still smell the gunpowder, could still feel the weight of the pistol in her hand, could still see the look in Thomas Talbot's eyes that said he'd enjoy making her suffer. Cole set Ethan down, turned to Clara. "You hit him?" "His shoulder. Not bad enough to stop him." "Good shooting." "Lucky shooting. I'll take it." Cole ran a hand through his hair, and Clara saw the exhaustion in his face, the fear he'd been holding back for his son's sake. "We need to move. Tonight. They'll be back with reinforcements, and when they come, we won't survive it," Clara finished. "No, we won't." Ethan was looking between them, his face pale. "Are we running away?" Cole crouched down. "Yeah, son, we're running away. Just for a little while until it's safe." "Where are we going?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere they can't find us. But this is our home." Cole's jaw tightened. "I know. But sometimes you have to leave home to keep the people you love safe." Clara watched this, watched Cole trying to explain to his son why the world was cruel and unfair, and she felt something break inside her. This was her fault, all of it. If she'd never come here, never brought her trouble to Cole's door, he and Ethan would still be safe in their cabin, living their quiet life. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Cole looked up at her. "For what?" "For all of this. For dragging you into my mess. For—" "Stop." Cole stood, took her face in his hands. "You didn't drag me into anything. I chose this. I chose you. And I'd make the same choice again. Even if it cost you everything, even then." He kissed her, and Clara tasted salt. Didn't know if it was from her tears or his. When they broke apart, Ethan was watching them with big eyes. "Papa, are you and Clara—" "Yeah, son. We are." "Does that mean she's staying?" Cole looked at Clara, and she saw the question in his face, the hope, the fear, the uncertainty of offering something he wasn't sure she wanted. Clara thought about running, thought about all the miles between here and safety, about starting over somewhere new with a different name and a different story. Thought about spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for the past to catch up. Then she thought about standing on that porch with a gun in her hand, about the way Cole had put himself between the Talbots and his son, about Ethan's small face asking her to promise she wouldn't leave. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I'm staying." The smile that broke across Cole's face was worth everything, worth the fear, worth the fight, worth whatever came next. "Then we better start packing," he said. "We've got a long night ahead of us." They moved fast, throwing clothes and food and ammunition into saddlebags while the sun set and the shadows grew long. Cole saddled 3 horses, his big roan, a smaller mare for Clara, and a gentle gelding for Ethan. They'd leave everything else behind. The cabin, the livestock, the life Cole had built from nothing. Clara helped Ethan pack his things, watched him choose between toys and clothes, saw him crying silently as he said goodbye to the foal in the barn. "We'll come back," she told him. "When it's safe, we'll come back and hope we'll still be here." "You promise?" Clara thought about all the promises she'd made and broken, about how easy it was to lie to children and how hard it was to keep the truth from hurting them. "I promise we'll try," she said. It was the best she could do. They left just after midnight, riding north by starlight. Cole led the way, Ethan behind him, and Clara brought up the rear. She looked back once at the dark shape of the cabin, at the life they were leaving behind, and she thought about how quickly things could fall apart. 1 week ago, she'd been running for her life. Now she was running again, but this time she wasn't alone. This time she had something worth fighting for. The horses picked their way through the darkness, and Clara listened to the night sounds, wind in the grass, the distant call of an owl, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. She thought about Thomas Talbot's promise to come back, about Samuel Talbot's eyes promising death. They'd be back all right. With the law, with hired guns, with enough force to make sure there was no escape. But by then, Clara and Cole and Ethan would be long gone. Ghosts in the night, shadows on the wind. 3 people who'd decided that survival was worth more than staying still. Clara touched the pistol at her hip and thought about the man she'd shot, about the blood she'd spilled to protect the people she loved. She'd do it again, without hesitation, without regret. Because some things were worth killing for, and some things were worth dying for. She just hoped they wouldn't have to find out which was which. They rode through the night until the horses started stumbling and Ethan fell asleep in the saddle, slumped forward against his father's back. Cole called a halt in a small hollow sheltered by cottonwoods, near a creek that ran clear and cold. Clara helped him lift Ethan down, watched Cole wrap the boy in blankets and settle him on the ground with a gentleness that made her chest ache. "We can't stop for long," Cole said quietly, checking the horses. "Few hours at most. They'll be tracking us come daylight." Clara knelt by the creek, splashed water on her face. The cold shocked her system, helped push back the exhaustion that was trying to drag her under. "How far do you think we've come?" "Maybe 15 miles. Not enough." "Will it ever be enough?" Cole didn't answer that, just loosened the saddle girths and checked the horse's hooves for stones. Clara watched him work, saw the stiffness in his movements that spoke of old injuries and new fear. He was pushing himself hard, running on determination and coffee and whatever reserves he had left. "You should sleep," she said. "I'll keep watch." "I'm fine." "Cole, you've been awake for 2 days straight. You're not fine." He straightened up, met her eyes across the darkness. "And what happens if I sleep and they catch up to us? What happens to Ethan then? What happens if you're so tired you fall off your horse and break your neck? That help him any?" Cole's jaw tightened, but he knew she was right. 2 hours. Then we move again." 2 hours, Clara agreed. He settled down next to his son, his rifle within easy reach, and was asleep in minutes. Clara sat with her back against a tree, the pistol heavy in her lap, and listened to the night. Every sound made her tense, the rustle of wind through leaves, the splash of the creek, the distant cry of some night bird. She kept expecting to hear hoofbeats, kept expecting to see torches coming through the darkness. But the night stayed quiet, and slowly Clara felt her own exhaustion creeping in. Her eyes were heavy, her body ached from hours in the saddle, and the events of the past days kept replaying in her mind. Thomas Talbot's face, the sound of her gunshot, Ethan's tears, Cole's hands on her face, telling her he'd never stopped loving her. She must have dozed off because she jerked awake to find pale gray light filtering through the trees and Cole shaking her shoulder. "Time to go," he said. Ethan was already up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The boy looked small and lost, wrapped in a blanket that dragged on the ground. Clara went to him, touched his shoulder. "You doing okay, kid?" "I'm hungry." "I know. We'll eat something once we're moving." "Where are we going?" Clara glanced at Cole. They hadn't talked about that, hadn't had time to make any kind of plan beyond putting distance between themselves and the Talbots. "North," Cole said, saddling his horse. "There's a town called Silver Point about 40 miles from here. Got a judge there who owes me a favor. Maybe he can help." "Or maybe he'll hand us over," Clara said quietly. "You got a better idea?" She didn't. So they mounted up and rode north as the sun climbed higher, turning the sky from gray to pale blue. The land here was rougher, all broken rock and scrub pine, and the horses had to pick their way carefully. They ate dried meat and hard biscuits in the saddle, washing it down with water from their canteens. By midday they reached a ridge that looked out over the valley below. Cole reined in, and Clara pulled up beside him. From this height, they could see for miles the rolling grassland, the dark line of trees marking a river, the distant smudge that might have been smoke from Silver Point. They could also see the dust cloud behind them, still far off, but coming steady. "How many you think?" Clara asked. Cole studied the cloud. "Hard to say. 6, maybe more. They're moving faster than us. Because they're not dragging a kid along." Ethan shifted in the saddle. "I'm not dragging. I'm riding just fine." "I know you are," Cole said, reaching back to squeeze his son's knee. "You're doing great." But Clara saw the worry in Cole's face, saw him calculating distances and time, weighing their odds. The Talbots were gaining on them, and there was nothing they could do about it except keep moving. They descended into the valley, following a game trail that wound between the rocks. The horses were tiring. Clara could feel her mare's breathing getting labored, could see foam starting to appear on her neck. Cole's roan was holding up better, but not by much. The gelding carrying Ethan was the worst off, its head hanging low. "We need to rest them," Clara said. "Can't. Not yet." "Cole, if we run these horses into the ground, we're done. We'll be on foot and they'll run us down like rabbits." He knew she was right. They both knew it. But stopping meant letting the Talbots get closer, and closer meant dead. They compromised, walking the horses for a while to let them cool down. Ethan complained that he was thirsty, that his legs hurt, that he wanted to go home. Clara listened to Cole try to comfort his son, try to explain that sometimes you had to do hard things to stay safe, and she felt the weight of her guilt pressing down harder with every word. This was her fault. All of it. If she'd just kept running when she got off that train, if she'd never gone to Cole's ranch, never brought the Talbots to his door. "Stop it," Cole said. Clara looked up, realized he was watching her. "Stop what?" "Whatever you're thinking. I can see it on your face." "You don't know what I'm thinking. You're thinking this is your fault, that we'd be better off if you'd never come here." Clara didn't answer because there wasn't a good answer to give. "You're wrong," Cole said, "about all of it. We're in this mess because I chose to be in it, because I wanted you here, because for the first time in 5 years I felt like I had something worth fighting for besides just getting through another day." "Your son's not worth fighting for?" "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Ethan was watching them with his serious dark eyes. "Are you two fighting?" "No," Cole said. "We're just talking." "It sounds like fighting." "Well, it's not." They rode in silence for a while. The sun was brutal now, beating down on them without mercy, and Clara could feel sweat soaking through her dress. Her skin felt burned, her lips were cracking, and every part of her body hurt from the hours in the saddle. Around mid-afternoon they came to a stream, and Cole finally let them stop. They watered the horses, filled the canteens, and Ethan splashed in the shallows while Clara and Cole stood in the shade of a scrub oak and looked at each other. "We're not going to make it to Silver Point before they catch us," Clara said. "I know. So what do we do?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We make a stand. Find somewhere we can defend, somewhere they can't just ride up and shoot us." "With a 4-year-old? You got a better idea?" Again, she didn't. Clara looked at Ethan, at the boy playing in the water like this was just another day, like his whole world wasn't falling apart around him. She thought about making a stand, about bullets and blood, and the very real possibility that Ethan would watch his father die. "There has to be another way," she said. "If you think of one, let me know." But there wasn't another way. They both knew it. The Talbots were coming with enough men and guns to make sure this ended their way, and all Clara and Cole could do was choose where to make their last stand. They mounted up again and kept riding. The land here was changing, getting rockier, the vegetation thicker. Cole kept scanning the terrain, looking for something, and finally he pointed toward a rocky outcrop maybe half a mile ahead. "There. That'll work." It was a natural formation of stone and earth, creating a sort of shallow cave with a good view of the surrounding area. Defensible, Clara thought. Not impregnable, but better than trying to fight in open ground. They rode up to it and dismounted. Cole immediately started checking sight lines, figuring out fields of fire. Clara helped Ethan off his horse and got him settled in the back of the cave with the blankets and what was left of their food. "Are we camping here?" Ethan asked. "For a little while," Clara said. "I don't like it. It's creepy." "I know, but it's safe." That was a lie, but it was the kind of lie you told children when the truth was too terrible to speak. Cole came over, carrying both rifles and a box of ammunition. He set them down carefully, then knelt in front of his son. "Ethan, I need you to listen to me very carefully." The boy's eyes went wide. "Okay." "Some men are coming, bad men, and they're going to try to hurt us." "The men from the ranch?" "Yeah, them. When they get here, I need you to stay in the back of this cave and not come out no matter what. You understand?" Ethan's lower lip trembled. "What if they hurt you?" "They won't. But if something happens, if something goes wrong, Claire's going to get you out of here and take you somewhere safe." "I don't want to go without you." Cole pulled his son close, held him tight. "I know, buddy, I know. But sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do." Clara watched them, felt her eyes burning. She turned away. walked to the mouth of the cave and looked out at the empty landscape. The dust cloud was closer now, much closer. She could almost make out individual riders. An hour, maybe less. Cole came to stand beside her. You know how to use that rifle? Well enough? Good. Because when they get here, we're going to need every advantage we can get. How many bullets we got? 30 for the rifles, 6 for each pistol. Not enough if they decide to just wait us out. They won't wait. Thomas isn't the patient type. Cole loaded both rifles, checked the pistols, and laid out the ammunition where they could reach it quickly. Clara watched the horizon and tried to calm the fear that was making her hands shake. Cole, she said quietly, if this goes bad, if they get past us, they won't. But if they do, you make sure Ethan gets out. You forget about me and you get him to safety. Cole grabbed her arm, turned her to face him. I'm not leaving you. Not again. Not ever. Your son is going to be fine. We're all going to be fine. You can't promise that. Watch me. He kissed her, hard and desperate, and Clara kissed him back. She tasted fear and determination and 5 years of longing, felt his hands in her hair, felt the solid weight of him anchoring her. When they broke apart, Cole pressed his forehead against hers. I love you. I should have said it 5 years ago, should have said it every day since, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Clara Whitlock, and I'm not losing you. I love you too, Clara whispered. I never stopped. Then let's make sure we both live long enough to do something about it. The riders appeared on the ridge just as the sun was starting to sink toward the horizon. Clara counted 7 of them, the 4 from the ranch plus 3 more, all armed, all looking like men who knew how to use their weapons. Thomas Talbot rode at the front, and even from this distance, Clara could see the cold purpose on his face. They'd come for blood, and they weren't leaving without it. Cole raised his rifle. Let them get closer. I want to make the first shot count. Cole, trust me. The riders came on slowly, spreading out as they approached the outcrop. They knew what they were doing, knew how to minimize their exposure. Clara felt her heart hammering against her ribs, felt her palms slick with sweat on the rifle stock. When the riders were about 200 yards out, Thomas raised his hand and they stopped. He sat there on his horse, staring up at the cave, and Clara could almost feel his eyes on her. Braddock! Thomas's voice carried across the distance. We can do this easy, or we can do this hard. Cole didn't answer. Give us the woman and you and your boy walk away. You got my word. Your word's worth shit, Cole called back. Thomas laughed. Fair enough. Then how about this? You got about 10 seconds to send her out before we come up there and drag her out. Cole glanced at Clara. She shook her head. Your choice, Cole shouted, but nobody's dragging anyone anywhere. Then you're a dead man. The riders started forward again, and Cole fired. The shot cracked across the valley, and one of the men jerked backward off his horse. The other riders scattered, diving for cover behind rocks and scrub. Now they're mad, Clara said. Good. Mad people make mistakes. Gunfire erupted from below. Bullets whined off the rocks around them, sent chips of stone flying. Clara ducked, raised her rifle, and fired at a shape behind a boulder. Didn't know if she hit anything, but the shape stopped moving. The fight settled into a terrible rhythm. The Talbots would advance. Cole and Clara would drive them back with gunfire. And then there'd be a pause while everyone reloaded and caught their breath. Minutes stretched into an hour, then longer. The sun kept sinking, turning the sky orange and red. Clara's shoulder ached from the rifle's recoil. Her ears were ringing from the gunshots. She could taste dust and gunpowder, could smell her own fear sweat. Behind them, Ethan was crying quietly. Clara wanted to go to him, wanted to tell him it would be okay, but she couldn't leave her position. Couldn't give the Talbots an opening. How much ammunition we got left? Cole asked during one of the pauses. Clara checked. Maybe 10 rounds. You? About the same. Not enough. Not nearly enough. As if sensing their weakness, the Talbots pressed harder. 2 of them made a run at the cave from the left side while the others lay down covering fire. Cole shot one, but the other made it to cover just 20 yards from their position. Too close. Way too close. Clara fired at the muzzle flash from his rifle, heard a scream, one less. But they were still outnumbered, still running out of bullets, still losing this fight by inches. Papa! Ethan's voice high and terrified. Cole turned, and in that second of distraction, Thomas Talbot stepped out from behind cover and fired. The bullet caught Cole in the side, spun him around. He went down hard, his rifle clattering on the stone. Clara screamed his name, dropped to her knees beside him. Blood was spreading across his shirt, dark and wet. His face was white with pain. "I'm okay," he gasped. You're shot. You're not okay." Cole tried to sit up. Couldn't. "Clara, you have to. They're coming." She looked up and saw Thomas Talbot climbing toward them, flanked by two of his men. The old man, Samuel, was coming up the other side. They had her bracketed, had her trapped. Clara grabbed her pistol, stood up, and fired. Hit one of the men with Thomas, saw him fall, but her hammer clicked on empty. No more bullets. Thomas kept coming, his face twisted with rage. "It's over, Clara. Come quiet or I'll kill the boy first and make you watch." Clara looked at Cole bleeding on the ground, at Ethan huddled in the back of the cave, at the men closing in from both sides. She thought about everything they'd been through, everything they'd survived, and she knew it wasn't enough. They'd lost. "Don't hurt them," she said, her voice breaking. "Please. They didn't do anything. This is between you and me." Now you're thinking clear. Thomas was 10 feet away, his pistol trained on her. "Step away from Braddock." Clara didn't move. "You have to promise. Promise me you won't hurt them." "Clara, no!" Cole tried to raise his rifle, but he was too weak, too hurt. "I promise," Thomas said. "Now move." Clara took one step, then another. Thomas grabbed her arm, yanked her toward him. She stumbled, fell to her knees. "Pathetic," Thomas said. "My brother died for this?" He raised his pistol, pointed it at her head, and Clara closed her eyes. She thought about Cole, about Ethan, about all the things she'd never get to say or do or be. The gunshot came, but Clara felt no pain. She opened her eyes and saw Thomas Talbot stagger backward, a red hole blossoming in his chest. He looked down at it, confused, then fell. Clara spun around. Cole was lying on his side, his rifle smoking, his face gray with pain and effort. He'd made the shot. Somehow, wounded and half-conscious, he'd made the shot. The other Talbots hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation Clara heard something. Hoofbeats. A lot of them. Riders poured over the ridge. 20, maybe more. They wore badges, carried rifles, and at their head rode a man in a black coat with a marshal's star pinned to his chest. The Talbot men dropped their weapons immediately. Samuel Talbot stood frozen, staring at his dead son, his face slack with shock. The marshal rode up to the cave, dismounted. He was an older man with gray hair and hard eyes, and he looked at the scene, the bodies, the blood, Cole bleeding on the ground, and his expression didn't change. "Cole Braddock?" he asked. "That's me," Cole managed. "Got a telegram from Judge Morrison in Silver Point. Said you might be in trouble, asked me to check on you." The marshal's eyes moved to Clara. "You Clara Whitlock?" Clara nodded, couldn't speak. "Well, you've caused quite a stir." The marshal looked at Samuel Talbot. "That's far enough, old man. You're under arrest for attempted murder." "You can't arrest me," Samuel's voice was shrill. "That woman killed my son." "From what I can see, she defended herself. From what the judge tells me, your son Raymond was a brutal man who got what he had coming." The marshal gestured to his deputies. "Take him, and the rest of them." The deputies moved in, rounding up the surviving Talbot men. Clara watched them go, watched Samuel Talbot being dragged away still protesting, and she couldn't quite believe it was real. "How?" she started. "Judge Morrison's known Cole for years," the marshal said. "When he got word there might be trouble, he sent for me. Good thing, too. Looks like we got here just in time." Clara looked at Cole. "You sent word to the judge?" "Before we left," Cole said weakly. "Figured we might need backup." "You could have told me." "Where's the fun in that?" He tried to smile, but his eyes were rolling back. Clara caught him as he slumped sideways, held his head in her lap. The marshal was already shouting for a doctor, for supplies, for someone to help. Ethan came running from the back of the cave. "Papa, Papa, don't die!" "Not dying," Cole mumbled. "Just resting my eyes." Clara pressed her hand against the wound in his side, trying to slow the bleeding. The bullet had gone clean through. She could see the exit wound. That was good. Meant no lead left inside to fester, but he'd lost a lot of blood, and his skin was cold to the touch. "Stay with me," she said. "Cole? You stay with me, you hear?" "Always," he whispered. Then his eyes closed and he went limp in her arms. The next hours passed in a blur. The marshal's doctor, a gruff man with steady hands and a flask of whiskey he used for everything from sterilizing wounds to steadying nerves, worked on Cole while Clara held Ethan and tried to keep the boy from seeing too much. They moved Cole down to flatter ground, made camp, and waited. The doctor finally emerged, wiping blood from his hands. "He'll live. Lost a lot of blood, but the bullet missed anything vital. He's tough. I'll give him that." Clara felt something loosen in her chest. "Can I see him?" "He's sleeping. Best thing for him. Let him rest, and by tomorrow he should be strong enough to travel." Clara nodded, unable to speak. Ethan was crying again, but these were tears of relief. She held him while the marshal explained what would happen next. The Talbots would be taken to Silver Point to face charges. Clara would need to give a statement. Cole would be considered a hero for defending his family against armed aggressors. "What about me?" Clara asked. "The Talbots will say I murdered Raymond." "They can say whatever they want. Judge Morrison's already dismissed any charges based on the evidence we've gathered." The marshal looked at her steadily. "Raymond Talbot was a known drunk and abuser. Half a dozen people have come forward with stories about what he did to you. As far as the law is concerned, you acted in self-defense." Clara couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You mean it's over?" "It's over." She started crying then, couldn't help it. 5 years of running, of fear, of looking over her shoulder, and it was finally over. Ethan wrapped his thin arms around her waist and held on tight, and Clara held him back. That night, she sat by Cole's bedside and watched him sleep. His face was peaceful, the pain lines smoothed away. She touched his hand, felt the warmth of his skin, and she thought about how close they'd come to losing everything. Cole's eyes opened. Hey yourself, how you feeling?" "Like I got shot." "That's because you did." He managed a weak smile. "Where's Ethan?" "Sleeping. Finally. Kid's exhausted." "Can't blame him." Cole squeezed her hand. "We made it." "You made it. You're the one who sent for help." "We both made it. That's what matters." He looked at her, and his eyes were serious. "Clara, about what I said before, you meant it?" "Every word." Clara leaned down and kissed him gently. "Good, because I meant it too." "So what happens now?" "Now you get better, and then we figure out the rest." The rest being us, you, me, Ethan, whatever that looks like." Cole smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "I like the sound of that." Clara settled beside him, careful not to jostle his injury. Outside, the marshal's men were keeping watch, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt safe. The Talbots were finished. The law was on their side. And Cole was alive. They'd won. It didn't feel real yet. Maybe it wouldn't for a while. But sitting there in the darkness with Cole's hand in hers, listening to his breathing even out as he drifted back to sleep, Clara let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. That maybe they'd earned their happy ending after all. They stayed in Silver Point for 3 weeks while Cole healed. The town was bigger than Ridgeway, built around a silver mine that had played out years ago, but left behind enough prosperity that people had stayed. Judge Morrison put them up in a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher, who asked no questions and made chicken soup that actually tasted like something other than dishwater. Clara spent most of those weeks sitting by Cole's bedside, changing his bandages, making sure he ate, and stopping him from trying to get up before the doctor said he was ready. Ethan was a constant presence, chattering about everything and nothing, showing his father rocks he'd found and stories he'd heard from the other kids in town. The marshal had been true to his word. Samuel Talbot and his surviving men were locked up awaiting trial, and the charges against Clara had been formally dismissed. The judge had even written it up in the town newspaper, a small article about a woman who'd defended herself against an abusive husband and the men who'd tried to make her pay for surviving. It should have felt like vindication, like justice. But Clara kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, kept expecting someone to come through the door and tell her it had all been a mistake. "You're doing it again," Cole said one afternoon. He was sitting up in bed now, color back in his face, though he still moved carefully around the healing wound. "Doing what?" "Waiting for something bad to happen." Clara looked up from the shirt she was mending, one of Cole's torn during the fight. "Can you blame me?" "No, but you can't live your whole life braced for disaster." Worked pretty well for me so far. Cole reached out, took the shirt and needle from her hands, and set them aside. Come here. Clara moved to sit on the edge of the bed. Cole took her hand, his thumb brushing over the scars on her wrist. The ones he'd seen that first day. The ones that told the story of who she'd been and what she'd survived. It's over, he said quietly. The Talbots, the running, all of it. It's done. I know. Do you? Because you're still looking over your shoulder every 5 minutes like someone's going to burst through that door with a rope. Clara pulled her hand back, stood up, walked to the window. Outside, Ethan was playing with a stick and a hoop, racing it down the street with the kind of joy that only children who'd survived something terrible could manage. The resilience of the young, Clara thought. The ability to bounce back from horror like it was just another bad dream. I don't know how to not be afraid, she said. I've been afraid for so long, I don't remember what it feels like to just exist without looking for exits, without cataloging who might be a threat. Then we'll figure it out together, one day at a time. Clara turned to look at him. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's not impossible either. Cole shifted, winced slightly. Come back over here, please. She did. Sat on the bed and let him pull her close, careful of his injury. He smelled like the salve the doctor used, like soap and wool and something that was just Cole. I've been thinking, he said, about what happens after this, after I'm healed and we can leave Silver Point. And? We can't go back to Ridgeway, the ranch. Even if it's still standing, it's burned for us now. Everyone knows what happened, and small towns have long memories. Clara had thought about this too. Thought about Cole's cabin sitting empty, about the life he'd built there turning to dust. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. I'm not finished. He took a breath. There's land west of here. Good land, near a town called Cedar Falls. Judge Morrison says they're looking for settlers, offering homestead claims. We could start over there. Build something new. We? You, me, and Ethan, if you want. Clara pulled back to look at his face, searching for doubt or hesitation. Cole, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. I want to. I want you in my life, Clara. Not as some temporary arrangement until you find your feet. Not as someone I'm helping out of obligation. I want you there because I love you and because I can't imagine doing this without you. The words settled over her like a blanket. Warm, solid, real. Clara had spent so long convinced she didn't deserve this. Didn't deserve love or safety or a future that stretched beyond the next crisis. That hearing it spoken out loud made something crack open inside her. I don't know how to be someone's... She stopped. Tried again. I don't know how to be part of a family, how to be a mother to Ethan or a partner to you. I'm going to mess it up. We'll both mess it up. That's what people do. Cole's hand came up to cup her face. But we'll mess it up together and we'll figure it out as we go. That's all anyone does, Clara. Nobody has it all worked out. What if I wake up one day and want to run again? Then we'll talk about it. And if you need to go, I won't stop you, but I'm betting you won't. I'm betting you're tired of running. He was right about that. Clara was exhausted, bone-deep, soul-tired exhausted from years of looking over her shoulder and never letting herself settle. The idea of staying in one place, of building something with her own hands and watching it grow instead of watching it burn behind her, it was terrifying and tempting in equal measure. What about Ethan? She asked. What if he doesn't want me around? I shot a man in front of him, Cole. I brought violence to his life. You protected him. There's a difference. Cole was quiet for a moment. He asked me yesterday if you were going to be his new mama. Clara's breath caught. What did you tell him? I told him that was up to you, that I hoped so, but only if you wanted to be. And what did he say? He said he'd like that. Said you taught him how to scrub a floor and you didn't talk to him like he was stupid. Cole smiled slightly. High praise from a 4-year-old. Clara felt tears burning in her eyes. She blinked them back, but they came anyway, spilling down her cheeks. Cole pulled her close and let her cry against his shoulder, quiet, shaking tears that she'd been holding back for weeks. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm so scared of messing this up. I know, me too, but we'll be scared together. They stayed like that for a long time, Clara crying and Cole holding her, until she felt empty and wrung out and somehow lighter. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red and her face was blotchy, but Cole just wiped her tears away with his thumb and kissed her forehead. "So is that a yes?" he asked. "To Cedar Falls? To starting over?" Clara took a shaky breath. "Yeah, it's a yes." The smile that broke across Cole's face was worth everything. Worth the fear, worth the uncertainty, worth the risk of believing in something good again. "We'll leave as soon as I can ride," he said. "Give you time to think about what you want. What kind of house? What kind of life?" "I don't need a fancy house, Cole. I just need—" She stopped, surprised by the truth of what she was about to say. "I just need somewhere that feels like home." "Then that's what we'll build." 2 days later, the trial started. Clara had to testify, had to stand in front of a courtroom full of strangers and recount every ugly detail of her marriage to Raymond Talbot. The defense lawyer, a slick man from Denver who'd been hired by what was left of the Talbot fortune, tried to paint her as a scheming woman who'd married for money and killed when she didn't get what she wanted. Judge Morrison wasn't having it. He cut the lawyer off 3 times, threatened him with contempt twice, and finally told him to sit down and shut his mouth before he found himself disbarred. The jury took less than an hour to acquit Clara of all charges and find Samuel Talbot guilty of attempted murder, kidnapping, and a half-dozen other crimes. The old man stood when the verdict was read, his face red with rage, and had to be physically restrained by the bailiffs when he tried to lunge at Clara. "You'll pay for this," he screamed as they dragged him away. "I'll make sure you pay." But his threats rang hollow now. The Talbot fortune was gone, seized to pay debts and legal fees. The ranch in Colorado had been sold. Samuel would spend the rest of his life in prison, and his surviving sons were facing similar sentences. The empire they'd built on other people's suffering had collapsed, and Clara had walked away free. She should have felt triumphant, should have felt vindicated. Instead, she just felt tired. Cole was waiting for her outside the courthouse, leaning on a cane the doctor had given him. Ethan was holding his other hand, watching Clara with worried eyes. "You okay?" Cole asked. "I don't know," Clara said honestly. "Ask me tomorrow." They walked back to the boarding house together, the 3 of them, and Mrs. Fletcher had dinner waiting, pot roast and potatoes and apple pie for dessert. They ate at the small table in Clara and Cole's room, Ethan chattering about a dog he'd seen that could do tricks, and slowly Clara felt the tightness in her chest start to ease. This was what normal felt like. Boring, mundane, safe. She'd forgotten that such a thing existed. That night, after Ethan was asleep in his cot and Cole was dozing in the bed, Clara stood at the window and looked out at Silver Point. The town was quiet, most windows dark, just a few lights burning in the saloon at the end of the street. The sky was clear and full of stars, more stars than she'd seen in years. She thought about Cedar Falls, about starting over in a place where nobody knew her story, about building a house with Cole and raising Ethan, and maybe, someday, letting herself believe that she deserved this, that she'd earned it through survival and stubbornness, and refusing to let the world break her completely. Behind her, Cole stirred. "Can't sleep?" "Just thinking." "About?" Clara turned to look at him. "About how strange it is. How you can spend years running from something, and then suddenly you turn around and it's gone. Like it was never really chasing you at all." "It was chasing you. You just outran it." "We outran it," Clara corrected. "I wouldn't have made it without you." "Sure you would have. You're the toughest person I know." Clara crossed to the bed, sat down beside him. "I'm not tough. I'm just stubborn." "Same thing, most days." She laughed, surprising herself. It had been so long since she'd laughed that the sound felt foreign in her throat. Cole reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "I love you," he said. "In case I don't say it enough." "You say it plenty." "I'll say it more anyway." Clara leaned down and kissed him, slow and deep. Cole's hand came up to cup the back of her head, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this, just the 2 of them, together, alive. When they broke apart, Cole was smiling. "So when do you want to leave? For Cedar Falls?" "Soon as you're able. I'm ready to start building something instead of running from things." "Me too." They left Silver Point on a clear morning 2 weeks later. Cole could ride again, though he tired easily, and Ethan was excited about the adventure of going somewhere new. Judge Morrison had given them supplies, letters of introduction to people in Cedar Falls, and a legal document declaring Clara's name cleared and her past settled. "You've got a fresh start," the judge said, shaking Cole's hand. "Don't waste it." "We won't," Cole promised. They rode west, taking their time, camping under the stars and cooking over open fires. Ethan asked 1,000 questions about everything: why the sky was blue, how far away the mountains were, whether Clara thought they'd see bears. Clara answered as best she could, and when she didn't know the answer, she admitted it, and Ethan seemed to respect that honesty. On the third night, while Cole was tending the horses and Ethan was trying to catch fireflies in a jar, the boy came and sat beside Clara at the fire. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure, kid." "Are you going to marry my papa?" Clara looked at him, at his serious little face. "Would that be okay with you if I did?" Ethan thought about this. "I think so. You're not mean like some of the ladies in town, and you know how to make eggs that don't taste like rocks." Clara smiled. High praise. "And Papa's happier when you're around. He smiles more. He smiles because of you too, you know." "I know, but it's different. Like he's not just pretending to be okay. He actually is okay." Ethan caught a firefly, watched it glow in his cupped hands, then let it go. "I think you should marry him. Then you'd be my mama for real." The words hit Clara harder than she expected. She'd been married before, had worn a ring and said vows and promised to honor a man who'd turned those promises into weapons. But that had been a transaction, a prison sentence handed down by her father. This would be different. This would be a choice. "I think I'd like that," Clara said quietly, "if your papa asks me." "He will. He told me he was gonna." Clara laughed. "Did he now?" "Yep. Said he was waiting for the right time." Ethan looked at her sideways. "You think now's a good time?" "I think any time's a good time if it's what you both want." "Then you should tell him that." "Maybe I will." Cole did ask her 3 days later when they reached a ridge overlooking a valley so green it almost hurt to look at. Cedar Falls was visible in the distance, a small collection of buildings near a river, smoke rising from chimneys, fields spreading out in neat squares. "This is it," Cole said, reining in his horse. "Last chance to change your mind." Clara looked at the valley, at the town, at the future spread out before them. "I'm not changing my mind." "Good, because I've got something to ask you." He dismounted, walked over to Clara's horse, and helped her down. Ethan was watching from his own horse, grinning like he knew exactly what was coming. Cole took Clara's hands in his. "I know we've only been back together for a few weeks. I know this is fast and you've got every reason to be cautious, but I've wasted enough time in my life being careful and second-guessing, and I don't want to waste any more." "Cole, let me finish." He took a breath. "I want to build a life with you. Not just a house or a ranch, but a real life. I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep next to you every night. I want to raise Ethan together and maybe, if you want, have more kids. I want to grow old watching you garden or cook or do whatever it is you want to do. I want all of it, Clara. With you." Clara felt her eyes burning again. "You're asking me to marry you." "Yeah, I'm asking you to marry me." She looked at him, at this man who'd stood between her and the world's ugliness, who'd fought for her when he had every reason not to, who'd chosen her again and again, even when it cost him everything. "Yes," she said. "My answer is yes." Cole's face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. He pulled her close and kissed her while Ethan cheered and whooped from his horse. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing, and Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Pure, uncomplicated hope for the future. They rode down into Cedar Falls as a family. The town was small but welcoming, and the land office had 3 available homestead claims within riding distance of town. Cole chose one with a creek running through it and good soil for crops, and they filed the papers that same day. Building the house took all summer. Cole did most of the heavy work, but Clara learned to hammer nails and saw boards straight. Ethan helped where he could, fetching tools and holding things steady, proud to be part of the work. Neighbors came by to help raise the walls and put on the roof, and Clara learned their names and their stories and slowly started to feel like she belonged somewhere. The house wasn't fancy. 2 rooms to start, with plans to add more later. But it had good bones and a solid foundation, and when Clara stood in the doorway and looked out at the land they'd claimed, she felt something settle inside her. This was home. They got married in September in a small ceremony at the courthouse with Judge Morrison presiding and Ethan as the only witness. Clara wore a simple blue dress she'd made herself, and Cole wore his good shirt and the nervous smile of a man who couldn't quite believe his luck. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Cole kissed her like it was the first time and the last time and every time in between. Ethan clapped and shouted, "Now you're my real mama!" And Clara felt tears on her cheeks that had nothing to do with sadness. The town threw them a party that night. Nothing fancy, just food and music and dancing in the street. Clara danced with Cole until her feet hurt, and then she danced with Ethan, picking him up and spinning him around while he laughed. People she barely knew came up to congratulate them, to wish them well, to tell them they were glad they'd come to Cedar Falls. No one asked about her past. No one whispered about the trial or the Talbots or the woman in the blood-stained wedding dress. Here, she was just Clara Braddock, Cole's wife, Ethan's mother, a woman starting over. That night, lying in bed with Cole's arm around her and Ethan asleep in the next room, Clara thought about how far she'd come. From a scared girl being sold to pay a debt, to a battered wife planning her escape, to a widow running for her life. And now she was a woman with a home and a family and a future that belonged to her. "You're doing it again," Cole murmured in the darkness. "Doing what?" "Thinking too hard. I can practically hear your thoughts from here." Clara smiled. "Just thinking about how strange life is, how you can lose everything and find it all again in a completely different form. That profound enough for you?" "I'm serious. 5 years ago, I thought my life was over. Thought the best I could hope for was survival. And now you're stuck with me and a kid who asks too many questions. Now I'm exactly where I want to be." Cole pulled her closer. "Me too." They were quiet for a moment, listening to the sounds of the house settling, of Ethan's soft breathing from the next room, of the creek running outside their window. "Cole?" Clara said. "Yeah?" "Thank you for not giving up on me, for fighting for us." "You don't have to thank me for that." "I know, but I'm going to anyway." He kissed her temple. "Get some sleep. We've got work to do tomorrow." "Always work to do. That's the life we signed up for." Clara closed her eyes and felt herself drifting. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of sleep, wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. She was just tired in the good way, the way that comes from honest work and honest living. The seasons turned. Fall gave way to winter, and the first snow came early and stayed late. Clara learned to bake bread that didn't taste like bricks, and to mend clothes well enough that they didn't fall apart the first time you wore them. Cole built furniture for the house and started clearing land for spring planting. Ethan grew like a weed, losing his baby fat and turning into a gangly boy who could ride a horse almost as well as his father. In the spring, Clara found out she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening after Ethan had gone to bed. He'd been reading by the fire, and when she spoke the words, quiet and uncertain, he dropped the book and just stared at her. "You're sure?" he asked. "As sure as I can be." Cole crossed to her in 2 strides and swept her up, careful and gentle, his face buried in her hair. "I can't believe it. I thought, after everything." "I know, me too." "Are you happy about it?" Clara thought about that. Thought about all the reasons she'd believed she'd never be a mother, all the ways Raymond Talbot had tried to make sure she couldn't be. Thought about the fear and uncertainty that came with bringing a child into a world that could be cruel and unforgiving. But she also thought about Ethan's laughter, about the way Cole looked at his son with such fierce love, about the home they'd built together from nothing. "Yeah," she said, "I'm happy." The baby came in early winter during a snowstorm that trapped them in the house for 3 days. The midwife from town couldn't make it out, so Cole delivered the baby himself with Ethan helping by boiling water and fetching clean cloths. It was a girl, small and red-faced and loud, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. "What should we call her?" Cole asked, holding his daughter with the careful reverence of a man who understood how fragile new life could be. Clara looked at her daughter, at Cole, at Ethan hovering nearby with wide eyes. She thought about all the names she'd carried over the years, the girl she'd been, the wife she'd survived being, the woman she'd become. "Hope," she said. "Let's call her Hope." Cole smiled. "After Ethan's horse? After the thing that kept me going when I didn't think I could take another step." He kissed her forehead, then placed their daughter in her arms. Hope stared up at Clara with unfocused eyes, her tiny hand wrapping around Clara's finger, and Clara felt something shift inside her. Some final piece of the past falling away, making room for this new future. Ethan crept closer, peering at his sister. She's really small. She'll grow, Clara said. Can I hold her? Not yet, but soon. The boy seemed satisfied with that. He went to the window and looked out at the snow, and Clara heard him whisper, I'm a big brother now. The years that followed weren't easy. The ranch demanded constant work, and there were droughts and hard winters and seasons when the money ran thin. Clara's past still haunted her sometimes. Nightmares about Raymond Talbot, about Thomas's gun pointed at her head, about all the ways things could have gone wrong. But she learned to live with it. Learned that surviving something didn't mean forgetting it, just meant not letting it own you anymore. Ethan grew into a serious boy who loved books and horses in equal measure. Hope became a fearless toddler who followed her brother everywhere and drove him crazy with her constant questions. Clara watched them play in the creek behind the house and thought about all the versions of herself who'd never imagined she'd see this. Never imagined she'd be a mother watching her children grow up safe and loved. Cole was beside her through all of it. When she woke from nightmares, he held her until the shaking stopped. When the work felt like too much, he reminded her they were building something that would last. When she doubted herself, he told her she was stronger than she knew. And slowly, year by year, Clara started to believe him. One evening, 10 years after they'd arrived in Cedar Falls, Clara and Cole sat on the porch of their house and watched the sun set over the valley. The house had grown. They'd added 2 more rooms, a proper barn, a chicken coop that actually kept the foxes out. The land they'd claimed was productive now, fields of wheat and corn, cattle grazing in the pasture. Ethan was 14, already taller than his father, helping a neighbor fix a fence. Hope was 6, playing in the yard with a doll Cole had carved for her birthday. You ever think about the old days? Clara asked. Cole was quiet for a moment. Sometimes. Not as much as I used to. You miss Ridgeway? I miss the idea of it, the life I thought I'd have there. But I don't miss the reality. He looked at her. Do you? Clara thought about the woman she'd been when she stepped off that train in her blood-stained wedding dress. Thought about the fear and desperation that had driven her to Cole's door. Thought about all the ways she'd expected to die and all the ways she'd chosen to live instead. No, she said. I don't miss any of it. Not even a little. Well, maybe I miss the me that existed before all the bad stuff. The girl who thought the world was simple and fair, and that love was enough to fix anything. Clara smiled. But then I remember that girl was kind of an idiot. Cole laughed. She wasn't an idiot. She was young. Same thing. You're not that different from her, you know. Still stubborn, still brave, still more hopeful than you want to admit. Clara considered this. Maybe, but now I know hope isn't about believing everything will work out. It's about believing you can survive even when it doesn't. That's dark. That's honest. Cole reached over and took her hand. For what it's worth, I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you came back. I'm glad we got this. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from orange to pink to purple. Hope came running up the porch steps, her doll forgotten. Mama, can I stay up late tonight, please? How late? Until the stars come out? Clara looked at Cole, who shrugged. Your call. All right, Clara said, but only because it's a clear night and the stars are worth staying up for. Hope cheered and ran back to the yard. Clara watched her go, this child she'd never thought she'd have, this girl who'd never know the fear that had defined so much of Clara's life. That was the point, she realized. Not to forget the past or pretend it hadn't happened, but to make sure the next generation didn't have to carry the same weight. To give them something better, something safer, something they could build on instead of run from. What are you thinking? Cole asked. That we did okay. With all of this. With them. We're not done yet. I know. But what we've built, it's good. It's enough. Cole squeezed her hand. It's more than enough. The stars came out slowly, one by one, until the sky was full of them. Clara and Cole and Hope sat on the porch and watched, and Clara thought about how far light had to travel to reach them, how many years those stars had been burning before their light finally arrived. Some things were worth the wait. Some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth surviving for. Clara had learned that the hard way. Had learned that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments, but about choosing someone every day, even when it was hard. Had learned that family wasn't just blood, but the people who stood beside you when the world tried to knock you down. Had learned that home wasn't a place, but a feeling of belonging you built with your own two hands. She'd learned that the past didn't have to define the future, that survival was its own kind of victory, that starting over wasn't about forgetting where you came from, but about deciding where you wanted to go. And she'd learned that sometimes, if you were stubborn enough, and lucky enough, and brave enough, you got a second chance. A chance to build something new from the ashes of everything that had burned. A chance to love and be loved without fear. A chance to wake up each morning and choose hope over despair, connection over isolation, staying over running. Clara Braddock, formerly Whitlock, formerly Talbot, formerly a girl who thought her story had already been written, had taken that chance, had grabbed it with both hands and refused to let go, even when letting go would have been easier. And sitting on that porch with her husband beside her and her daughter counting stars and her son coming home from an honest day's work, Clara knew she'd made the right choice. Not because everything was perfect, not because the scars had disappeared or the nightmares had stopped or the past had been erased, but because she'd fought for this, had earned it through blood and tears and refusing to quit, had built it from nothing with people who'd chosen to build alongside her. That was worth something. That was worth everything. The stars kept coming, filling the sky with light, and Clara watched them and thought about tomorrow. About the work that needed doing, the children who needed raising, the life that needed living. It wouldn't be easy. It never was. But it would be hers. And that, in the end, was all anyone could ask for.